The grand Canterville Chase stood tall and mysterious under a grey sky. Its towers and stone walls whispered stories of the past, and the land around it stretched far and wide. Most locals avoided the place, claiming it was haunted. But when Mr. Hiram Otis, an American minister, decided to buy the house, he laughed at the warnings. "There's no such thing as ghosts," Mr. Otis declared. The Otis family consisted of Mr. Otis, his practical wife, their lively daughter Virginia, and their mischievous twin sons, often referred to as the Stars and Stripes. They also had an elder son, Washington, who was proud of his modern ways. The family arrived at Canterville Chase full of excitement, unfazed by its gloomy reputation. As they drove up the long path to the mansion, the air seemed heavier, and the trees swayed gently as if whispering secrets. At the entrance stood an old housekeeper named Mrs. Umney, who greeted them with a wary look. "Welcome to Canterville Chase," she said. "I hope you will be happy here, but I must warn you, this house has a troubled history." Mrs. Umney led them inside, where the grand hall stood as a reminder of Old England's glory. Thick tapestries hung from the walls, and ancient portraits stared down at the newcomers. In the middle of the room was a large, dark stain on the floor. "What is that?" Mrs. Otis asked. "That, madam, is the blood of Lady Eleanor Canterville. She was murdered here by her husband, Sir Simon, in 1575. The stain cannot be removed," Mrs. Umney explained solemnly. "Nonsense," said Washington confidently. He fetched a bottle of Pinkerton's Champion stain remover from his bag and scrubbed the floor vigorously. In moments, the stain was gone. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed outside, followed by a loud clap of thunder. Mrs. Umney gasped and sank into a chair. "The stain always returns," she whispered. "And the ghost of Sir Simon still haunts this house. Beware." But the Otis family only laughed. Mr. Otis said, "If there's a ghost, we'll deal with it the American way." That night, the family settled into their new home, unaware of what awaited them. As the clock struck midnight, a strange clanking sound echoed through the hallways. Mr. Otis, a practical man, got up to investigate. He opened his door and saw a ghostly figure, Sir Simon Canterville himself. The ghost had a pale face, hollow eyes, and was wrapped in rusty chains. Instead of being frightened, Mr. Otis calmly said, "My dear sir, those chains are terribly noisy. You should oil them." He handed the ghost a small bottle of lubricant and went back to bed. Sir Simon was stunned. Never in his centuries of haunting had he been treated with such indifference. The next morning, the family woke to find the bloodstain had reappeared, darker than before. Washington removed it again, but the twins were more interested in setting traps for the ghost. That evening, they tied strings across the hallway and placed a bucket of water on a door. When Sir Simon appeared, he tripped over the strings, and the bucket drenched him completely. The twins burst into laughter while the ghost retreated to his chamber, humiliated. "Americans have no respect," Sir Simon muttered angrily. Sir Simon tried different ways to scare the family. He appeared in terrifying forms, a headless knight, a skeleton in a shroud, and even a glowing spectre. But every attempt failed. The Otis family either laughed or ignored him. The twins took every opportunity to prank him, leaving slippery butter on the floor or throwing pillows at him. For the first time in his ghostly existence, Sir Simon felt defeated. "They're supposed to scream in terror, not mock me," he complained to himself. One night, while wandering the halls in despair, Sir Simon encountered Virginia. Unlike the rest of her family, she did not laugh at him. Instead, she looked at him with curiosity and kindness. "Why are you so unhappy?" she asked gently. Sir Simon hesitated, unused to such compassion. "I have been cursed to haunt this house for centuries," he confessed. "I cannot find peace. Maybe I can help you," Virginia said. The ghost was taken aback. Could this young girl really free him from his eternal suffering? Sir Simon looked at Virginia with a mixture of hope and sorrow. No one had spoken to him with such kindness in centuries. He hesitated before speaking, as if summoning the courage to reveal his story. "It was many years ago," Sir Simon began, his voice heavy with regret. "I lived here with my wife, Lady Eleanor. She was a gentle soul, but one day, we quarreled over something foolish. In my anger, I ended her life." Virginia's eyes widened in shock, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue. "The Canterville family condemned me for my crime. I was cursed to wander these halls as a ghost, never to rest until someone could show me the mercy I denied my wife." Virginia felt a pang of sadness for the ghost. She could see the torment in his hollow eyes, the weight of his guilt pressing on him like a heavy chain. "Isn't there a way to break the curse?" she asked. "There is," Sir Simon said slowly. "But it requires great courage. The prophecy says that a pure soul must pray for me and weep for my sins. Only then can I find peace and cross to the other side." Virginia thought for a moment. "I'll help you," she said firmly. Sir Simon stared at her in disbelief. "You would risk so much for me? A murderer? You regret what you did," Virginia replied. "And everyone deserves a chance at forgiveness." Sir Simon led Virginia to a small, hidden door at the end of a corridor. It opened into a dark, narrow staircase that spiraled downward. The air grew colder as they descended, and Virginia could feel an eerie presence around her. They reached a small, stone chamber lit by the faint glow of moonlight through a crack in the wall. In the center of the room was a worn inscription carved into the floor. "Here lies the key to my release," Sir Simon said, pointing to the words. "If you truly wish to help me, you must pray for me here." Virginia knelt on the cold stone, her heart pounding. She clasped her hands and closed her eyes, whispering a prayer for Sir Simon's soul. The air seemed to grow heavier, and an unearthly wind swirled around the chamber. Virginia felt tears welling in her eyes as she thought of Sir Simon's sorrow and the life he had lost. The tears fell onto the stone, and the chamber seemed to shudder. Sir Simon watched in awe, his ghostly form flickering as if caught between two worlds. "Thank you," he said softly. "No one has ever wept for me before." As Virginia continued to pray, the room filled with a strange, warm light. The oppressive darkness lifted, and for the first time, Sir Simon felt a sense of peace. His chains began to dissolve, turning into a fine mist that drifted away. "Am I free?" he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. Virginia looked up and smiled. "Yes, you're free." Sir Simon's ghostly form began to fade, but before he disappeared completely, he said, "Thank you, Virginia. You have given me what I thought was lost forever, hope." Virginia returned to the main house, her heart heavy but full of a quiet satisfaction. The family had been worried when they couldn't find her, and they were relieved to see her safe. "Where have you been?" Mrs. Otis asked, pulling Virginia into a hug. "I was helping someone," Virginia replied simply. Her brothers looked at her suspiciously. "Did you see the ghost?" one of the twins asked. "Yes," Virginia admitted. "But he won't trouble us anymore." The twins exchanged disappointed glances, already missing the antics of their ghostly adversary. The next day, Virginia led her family to the hidden chamber. They found a small skeleton lying on the stone floor, the remains of Sir Simon. His soul may have found peace, but his body still lay where he had perished centuries ago. Mr. Otis, always practical, arranged for the skeleton to be given a proper burial in the village cemetery. The townspeople, who had always feared the house, were shocked by the news. As they laid Sir Simon to rest, the local vicar spoke words of forgiveness and redemption. Virginia placed a single white rose on the grave, a symbol of the compassion that had freed him. The mansion itself seemed to change after Sir Simon's departure. The gloomy atmosphere lifted, and the air felt lighter. Even Mrs. Umney, the housekeeper, remarked on how cheerful the place had become. "It's as if the house has been cleansed," she said. Virginia often visited Sir Simon's grave, reflecting on the courage it took to help him. She felt proud of what she had done, knowing she had made a difference. The Otis family continued to live at Canterville Chase, enjoying its beauty without fear. But they would never forget the ghost who had once roamed its halls, seeking redemption. News of Sir Simon's burial spread quickly through the village. The locals, who had always avoided Canterville Chase, were both relieved and intrigued. For generations, tales of the ghost had been passed down, each story more chilling than the last. Now, they couldn't believe the Otis family, a group of foreigners, had brought peace to the restless spirit. "Do you think the ghost is truly gone?" an old farmer asked at the village market. "They say the young girl, Virginia, helped him move on," another replied. "Imagine that. A child succeeding where so many had failed." Virginia, however, avoided the attention. She didn't feel like a hero, she simply believed she had done the right thing. Still, whenever she ventured into the village, people greeted her with admiration. "You're braver than most of us," the vicar told her one Sunday after church. Virginia only smiled politely. She didn't feel brave, she felt grateful. Grateful that she had been able to help someone in need, even if that someone was a ghost. Back at Canterville Chase, life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. The gloomy shadows that had once hung over the mansion were gone, replaced by a sense of warmth and welcome. The twins, however, missed their pranks. "It's boring without the ghost," one of them complained during breakfast. "You shouldn't say that," Virginia said gently. "He wasn't happy. Would you really want someone to stay miserable just for your amusement?" The twins looked sheepish but didn't reply. They knew their sister was right, even if they wouldn't admit it. One afternoon, while exploring the gardens, Virginia found a small envelope tucked inside a hollow tree. Curious, she opened it to find a faded letter written in elegant script. It read, "To the one who frees me, I leave my thanks and my blessings. May your kindness be repaid in ways you cannot yet imagine. Yours in gratitude, Simon Canterville." Virginia's heart swelled as she read the words. She didn't know how Sir Simon had left the letter, but she felt his gratitude like a warm embrace. She tucked the letter into her pocket, a reminder of the bond she had shared with the ghost. The family decided to host a small gathering for the villagers to celebrate the newfound peace at Canterville Chase. The event was held in the Grand Hall, which had been cleaned and brightened. The once dreaded bloodstain was gone for good, and the room seemed to glow with life. Mr. Otis, ever the gracious host, welcomed the guests. "We are thrilled to be part of this community," he said. "And we hope this house, which has seen so much, can now be a place of joy and togetherness." The villagers clapped politely, though many still glanced nervously at the corners of the room, half expecting the ghost to reappear. During the gathering, Virginia found herself standing near the fireplace, staring at the flickering flames. She thought about Sir Simon and the centuries he had spent alone. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Penny for your thoughts?" She turned to see the vicar, his kind eyes watching her. "I was just thinking about Sir Simon," Virginia admitted. "I hope he's happy now." "I'm sure he is," the vicar said. "You gave him something no one else could, redemption." Virginia nodded, but she couldn't help feeling a sense of loss. She had grown to care for the ghost, and now he was gone. As the evening wore on, the villagers warmed to the Otis family. They laughed and shared stories, and for the first time, the mansion felt like a true home. The twins, of course, couldn't resist causing a little mischief. They hid behind curtains and jumped out at unsuspecting guests, pretending to be ghosts. "Boo!" they shouted, sending an old man into a fit of laughter. Mrs. Otis shook her head with a smile. "Some things never change," she said. By the end of the night, the villagers left with lighter hearts, their fear of Canterville Chase replaced by a newfound respect for the Otis family. As Virginia stood on the steps, waving goodbye to the last guest, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The house was no longer haunted, but its history would always be a part of it. And that, Virginia thought, was a good thing. The days that followed the gathering at Canterville Chase were filled with laughter and light. The once ominous mansion now felt alive with joy. Mr. Otis spent his mornings tending to the grounds, while Mrs. Otis filled the house with the warmth of her hospitality. The twins, as mischievous as ever, roamed the halls in search of new adventures. Virginia, however, often found herself drawn to quiet moments of reflection. She would wander the gardens, sit by the stream, or explore the hidden corners of the house, her thoughts frequently returning to Sir Simon. One morning, as the sun rose over the estate, Virginia sat in her favorite spot beneath a sprawling oak tree. She held the letter Sir Simon had left her, its words etched in her memory. "Why do you look so serious, dear?" Mrs. Otis asked as she approached with a basket of flowers. "I was just thinking about Sir Simon," Virginia replied. "I wonder what it's like, finding peace after so many years of unrest." Mrs. Otis placed a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You gave him that peace, Virginia. That's something to be proud of." Virginia smiled softly. "I hope so." The Otis family's life settled into a pleasant routine. Washington busied himself with various projects, determined to modernize the house further. The twins continued to find trouble wherever they could, but their antics brought more amusement than annoyance. One afternoon, Washington stumbled upon an old chest in the attic. Inside, he found a collection of dusty books, faded maps, and a small velvet pouch. "Look at this," he called out, bringing the items downstairs. The family gathered around as Washington opened the pouch to reveal a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny portrait of a woman. "It must be Lady Eleanor," Virginia said softly. The discovery of the locket sparked renewed interest in the history of Canterville Chase. The family spent evenings poring over the books and maps, uncovering stories of the house's past. They learned about the Canterville family, their triumphs, and their tragedies. "It's strange," Mr. Otis remarked one night. "Even though we're not part of this family's history, it feels like we've become a part of their story." Virginia nodded. "We have. And maybe it's our job to honor that story, to make sure it's remembered in a kinder way." Her words resonated with the family, and they decided to restore the mansion not just as a home, but as a tribute to its history. The renovations began in earnest. Washington worked tirelessly to repair the crumbling stonework, while Mrs. Otis focused on restoring the faded tapestries. Virginia took charge of the gardens, bringing color and life back to the grounds. The villagers, curious about the changes, often stopped by to lend a hand or simply admire the progress. They marveled at the transformation of Canterville Chase, which had gone from a place of fear to a symbol of hope and renewal. One day, as Virginia was planting roses along the path, the vicar approached her with a thoughtful expression. "You've done something remarkable here, Virginia," he said. "You've turned a haunted house into a place of beauty and love." As the seasons changed, the mansion became a gathering place for the community. The Otis family hosted picnics, dances, and storytelling evenings, inviting everyone to share in the joy they had found. Virginia often sat by the fireplace during these gatherings, listening to the villagers recount tales of Canterville Chase. She noticed how the stories began to shift, from frightening ghostly encounters to tales of redemption and courage. "It's amazing how stories can change," she said to Washington one evening. "They change because of you," he replied. "You showed everyone that even the darkest stories can have light." One quiet evening, Virginia visited Sir Simon's grave in the village cemetery. She placed a fresh bouquet of flowers at the site, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for teaching me that compassion can change everything." As she stood there, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and she felt a sense of calm wash over her. It was as if Sir Simon was there, offering his thanks in return. Virginia smiled and turned to leave, her steps light and her spirit lifted. Back at the mansion, the family gathered in the grand hall to celebrate the anniversary of their arrival at Canterville Chase. The twins had prepared a dramatic reenactment of Sir Simon's ghostly antics, complete with costumes and props. The performance had everyone in stitches, even Mrs. Umney, who had grown fond of the family despite her initial skepticism. As the laughter echoed through the hall, Virginia looked around at her family and friends. The mansion, once cold and foreboding, now felt like the heart of their community. That night, as Virginia lay in bed, she thought about the journey she had taken over the past year. She had faced fear, learned the power of compassion, and discovered the importance of honoring the past while building a brighter future. The house, the ghost, and the people around her had all become part of her story. And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that Canterville Chase would forever be a place of light, laughter, and love.